Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive, and I'm here with a video about mythology in the terms of your own personal mythology. So one of the things that is very important for HSPs and empaths is to think about what is your kind of personal mythology about what it means to be highly sensitive, what it means to be an empath. And the reason I'm bringing this up because I see a lot of mythology stories out there about how being sensitive is somehow, kind of suffering role, where there's this whole big story around why this is meaningful and why this is important. And while I don't want to say that suffering does not have a role or a place in our life, it does. But what I want to point out is if you make suffering into like an ultimate goal or something very meaningful in and of itself, then it's really hard to find a way out of suffering. Because if you're making being sensitive all about suffering, if you're making it about, for example, carrying other people's wounds or healing other people and kind of taking on their problems, or it's like we're sensitive so we feel everything and we're deeply affected by everything, and so we're suffering for the world or by the world or in the world, or just being in the world is painful. All these kinds of ideals and ideas, and they are ideals because they're these kind of mythologies where it's almost like you can become like this hero figure in this kind of mythology, and you can start to create all kinds of other stories around why this is important and meaningful and why you have no choice and all these things. But if you don't examine the underlying basic idea, like the basic assumptions, and if you don't question them, then you get caught up in this whole kind of cycle of suffering and victim thinking. And so I want to point that out because I see it a lot. And what happens then is that if you start thinking in that way, then you don't look for any real solutions, because deep down you're convinced that there's no solution anyway, that it's your job to suffer and it's your job to be hurt, and that there's nothing you can do to get out of pain and to get out of misery, right? So there's a few stories out there that I've seen that I want to point out here. One of them is for empaths, that there's some healers saying that for empaths it's our job to take on the pain of the world and transform it, and that's why we're here, that we're here to clean up the mess. I strongly disagree. I think if you're in that kind of thinking, it's more like a justification of where you're at. And I think that's why it's really important to look at mythology and really question our own mythology, no matter where we're at, because if you've been doing something for a while, then of course it's going to make a lot of sense when you come across a story that justifies what you're doing. But you have to look at where the story leads. Is there any kind of space for more joy to come into your life? Because if you are convinced that it's your job to take on the pain of the world, then there's no joy in sight. There is so much pain, there's so much suffering. If it's your job to take it all on, then yeah, that's painful, and it's painful for a long time. But there's no reason to assume that that will be true. It may feel very true if that's what you're kind of currently doing, and if it just feels like you don't know what else to do, it may feel very true. But I want you to be careful of taking it on as some kind of big truth about your life. Another kind of story that is out there is this story of sensitive people having to embody love and light no matter where they are. So there's numerous people who are actually in very kind of toxic situations, and they don't leave because they have this kind of mythology of it's my job to be in this painful situation and radiate love and light, and just to be the love and be the light in the middle of all this, and making it really hard for themselves to actually be that, because there's this story around that the suffering is just part of their life and they just have to kind of make the best of it and turn themselves into a kind of example. And there's this underlying idea that if you do that, you can actually change other people, you can change situations. But everybody has free will. People are not going to change just because you're being love and light. And the danger here is that actually you become a doormat. You don't become love and light, and you definitely don't become love and light for yourself. You become a doormat, and because you're not offering any kind of resistance or any kind of you're not saying no in any significant way. So people are actually able to keep on doing what they do, and they might actually keep on doing what they're doing much longer than if you just kind of removed yourself from the situation or just stopped, trying to support those people and trying to stop sending them love and light. So I know that sounds a little bit contradictory or unpopular in a way, but you really have to think about what the impact is. And there is a tendency for HSPs to think in terms of, if I just love harder, if I just love more, if I just give more, then everything will change. And that's a really unbalanced kind of thinking, because you are not here to just give. You are a human being, and you need to give and receive. And you're responsible for bringing those two into balance inside of yourself. And if you're only giving and you make that into a big, big heroic kind of story, then you're going to stay stuck in that giving. And then you're going to interpret everything in your life in terms of, I just have to give more. And it's not, if you recognize this, I don't want you to feel bad about it, because these are just stories that we at some point started telling ourselves because they made us feel better and they helped us to stay positive. And sometimes you are stuck in a situation where you have no choice. And a lot of these stories come from childhood, where you really had to just make do with what was your situation. But at this point, it's important to start looking at what those stories are and to start reevaluating them. Like, where do they lead? Because any story that revolves around suffering being normal is going to get you into, keep you stuck in situations where there is suffering, because that's what you're expecting, and that's what you're kind of, etching out as your role in life. So it's an uncomfortable topic, but it's important to address. So if you can, if you have a kind of vision, a mythology about, your role as an HSP or your role as an empath, see if you can spell it out for yourself. See if you can write it out, like, what is actually a role that you see yourself having. And see if you could take it to the logical limits. Like, what would happen if everybody started to behave like this? Or what would happen if, somebody that you knew who was not like this started to behave like this? What would the impact on their life be? Where would they end up? What would they start doing? Because these kind of things have a very big hold, and these mythologies can keep you from actually doing what is most healthy and most needed, and keep you stuck in very old patterns. And I definitely believe that it's not our job to suffer, and that no matter what abilities you may have to transmute or transform negative energy, or to be positive regardless, those are all really good things. But you want to start thinking in terms of, where does it have the most impact? Where does it actually make a difference? It's in Dutch we have this saying of throwing pearls to the swines, which in some ways sounds kind of aristocratic almost. Like some things are better than others, and some people are better than others. But that's not what it is. It's like, swines, pigs don't appreciate pearls. So if you have pearls, you don't want to give it to swines, because it's not gonna make a difference for them. It's not gonna help them. It's not gonna do anything for them. And so we have to think in the same way about our own energy. Like, where is our own energy actually going to make a difference? Where is what we have to offer actually going to have an impact? It's like an investment. You don't want to invest in the kind of situations or the kind of people who are really actually not that interested in what you have to offer. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of time. Right? So you want to start putting yourself in places where you actually do have a positive impact, and where you're appreciated for it, so that you actually feel supported in doing what you do and being who you are. And then you want to start looking at what the mythology is that arises out of that. What is the story you can tell yourself when you're actually in a kind of positive, uplifting place, where you're actually being appreciated, and where your being and your work is actually having an impact, where sending love and light actually makes a huge difference, and it's not being thrown down this dark hole, this endless, bottomless pit, but it actually has an impact, and you can actually see the impact, you know, and you're not just trying to see it because you're so desperate to you know, see change. So these are really important things to look at, and to start focusing, you know, on where you actually matter as a sensitive person. Because it's an illusion to think that you can just put yourself in any situation with anyone and that you're going to have this great impact. You will have some impact anywhere, but you want to think about where it actually will be appreciated and where it will actually be, you know, most effective. So a little bit pragmatic, you know, start getting a little bit pragmatic about what actually makes sense and what actually would help you as a sensitive person to get you into, you know, better situations of, you know, taking better care of yourself. Whatever it is in your own life that needs changing, what are the kind of ways of thinking that are going to get you there, as opposed to the kind of thinking that keeps you exactly where you are and tries to justify it.